Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good wherever you are. I'm your host, That Lit Astro Chick, the channel where we discuss the natal charts of writers, artists, and anyone else that I find interesting. So in honor of Black History Month, I wanted to continue with my exploration of Black authors. I'm always going to talk about Black authors on this channel. However, I did want to dedicate this month to them because it is their month in the United States. I am going to discuss the natal chart of Wallace Thurman. Now, I'm sure that most of us have colloquially heard the phrase, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. And when I was a kid, I thought obviously it must have come from an Isaac Hayes song, but it doesn't. It, in fact, comes from the book, The Blacker the Berry, which is by Wallace Thurman. Wallace Thurman was an author as part of the Harlem Renaissance. He published two major works. The first one is Infants of the Spring, and the other one is The Blacker the Berry, which is a really fascinating book that's about colorism, featureism, and texturism. And because I sometimes hang out on the Black side of YouTube, obviously, there have been a lot more discussions around colorism and featureism and texturism and how it affects darker skinned African American women. And this isn't just about the paper bag test. It's really more about the misogynoir that's present within the Black community. I've always really enjoyed his works. Especially because I found them to be really interesting and different and refreshing. It's still insane to me that The Blacker the Berry was written almost a century ago or more than a century ago, and yet it could still be very relevant today. So for today's natal chart, we are going to examine Wallace Thurman. So Wallace Thurman was born on August 16th, 1902, and we don't have the birth time, but he was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. So the first thing that I notice about his chart is that he is born on the 16th, and in numerology, the number 16 is oftentimes associated with tragedy due to its Neptunian influence. So he could have had a life that was very tragic per circumstances. I believe that he did have some issues, specifically when it came to his alcohol addiction. The next thing that I noticed is that he was born on the 22nd degree. I'm sorry, his sun is in the 22nd degree. And in astrology, that's going to be referred to as being the control or being controlled degree. So he most likely had a lot of situations in life, especially ongoing because the sun, it deals with your ego, where he either had to consider what other people wanted or what he wanted. And for anybody who is listening out there, I know I don't currently have any views, but for anybody who is listening out there, if you do have your sun at the 22nd degree, always go with what you want. Don't go with what they want, because 2 + 2 is 4. It's going to end up in an accident. Now, Wallace Thurman was a Leo sun, and the sun is in its rulership when it's in Leo. So this is a dignified position for it to be in. Leo is the sign that represents risks, investments, games, sports, entertainment, creativity. It's the sign of the zodiac that is the most associated and the most plugged into humanity. So Leo as a sign, it tends to be a sign that deals very much in terms of relationships. Think romantic relationships, relationships with children. Leos are oftentimes known for being very good with children. And in addition to that, he would have been somebody who spoke very much from his heart space, because he did have his sun conjunct Mercury in Leo. And Mercury in Leo, that most likely represented in him probably having a big mouth. And I definitely could see that in his writing, especially in Infants of the Spring, because it's very expansive in discussing the human conditions of its characters when they are living in Harlem. And that signified by having that sun conjunct Mercury in Leo. Another aspect that I think points to him being known as a writer, and sidebar, I think that he would have been as famous as Langston Hughes, who was his counterpart. However, he passed away when he was very young. I want to say at about 32 or 33. And that is because he has his midheaven is conjunct with his sun, and it's running parallel to his Mercury, also in Leo. So sometimes my friends and I will ask, like, well, astrologically speaking, are there any types of signs that somebody is going to make it big as a writer? And the one that I'm noticing as I'm just doing these charts is that oftentimes they will have their sun either conjunct Mercury, or Mercury is on the midheaven, or their sun is on the midheaven. And Wallace Thurman is somebody that has all three combined. Now, we don't quite know the degree of the moon. However, I'm going to guess from my little calculator that he has a Capricorn moon. So with his sun being in quincunx to his moon, this means that he most likely had to make some sort of adjustments in terms of how he feels, because the moon is at its detriment when it's in Capricorn. However, his Saturn is conjunct to his moon in Capricorn. So what this means is that he probably had to make an adjustment or a delay when it comes to his desire for work or with his work ethic. When he was growing up, he may have grown up in a household where his father wasn't present or where his parents didn't live in the home. Another interpretation is that he could have possibly had a stronger relationship with somebody else outside of the family. So maybe he could have gotten to know his father. I think that maybe he didn't know his father. Or his grandparents would have been very important to him. And in addition to that, he has his Chiron that runs parallel to his moon and his Saturn. And that's also in a Capricorn. And the reason as to why that's important is because he was most likely somebody who did struggle with his work ethic and probably could have been seen as being lazy. However, he would have, I think if he had lived longer, he would have been able to overcome this. But there is like a very heavy Capricorn energy, and Capricorn is one of the signs of the zodiac that refers to race. So this probably could have meant that him speaking about race was important to him. And in addition to that, he does have his moon. It's running, and it looks like it's a quincunx to his Neptune, and his Chiron is also in opposition to his Neptune in Cancer. So this probably could have meant that he could have maybe have spent more time daydreaming about a time when perhaps race would have been less important, or maybe to where he would have been more focused on cultural development as opposed to, I guess, like another outside issue. But I do see, though, that race was a very important part of his character per his chart. Now, I was reading on Wikipedia about a rumor about Wallace Thurman, which was that he was probably gay. I thought when I first read Infants of the Spring, that he was most likely gay. That was what I thought when I first read the book. But apparently there was a lot of discussion on whether or not he was, because he got married, and his wife decided to leave him because she said that he was gay, and then he denied it. Looking at his chart astrologically speaking, I would say he was gay. And I'm saying that because he has his Venus conjunct his Mars in Cancer. Typically speaking, in a natal chart, if you see Venus conjunct Mars, because Venus is a feminine planet and then Mars deals with the masculine, it deals with their namesake, there was most likely a possibility that he was attracted to men. And maybe he wanted to keep that under wraps. I do believe that he did, because he does have his Mars is running parallel to his Neptune, which is also in Cancer. So there could have been something that maybe he was hiding when it came to his sexuality that he didn't want to get out. In addition to that, he has his Venus in opposition to the moon. So this will represent somebody who, in a man's chart, he most likely would not be living with women, or women would not be a very strong part of his life. And he may have wanted to go through great lengths to keep that under wraps. And I say that because he does have his Mars. It looks like it is in quincunx to his Jupiter in Aquarius. Now, I really do love seeing Jupiter in opposition to the sun in a chart, because it's going to point to someone who will be very popular. I saw this in Yadas's chart that I did a couple weeks ago. I've also seen this in J.D. Salinger's chart, because it allows for more opportunities to just fall into this person's lap. And per his work, he does seem like someone who has had a lot of exposure to a lot of different types of peoples and ideas. And these ideas most likely were very effective for him in terms of the way that he thought, because he does have his Uranus and Sagittarius, and in addition to the way that he writes and his conscious mind. And that's because he has his Mercury and his Sun that are trining with his Uranus and Sagittarius. I get the impression that if I was to meet Wallace today, he would be very similar to the YouTuber Themis and Thoth. He is a YouTuber that does incredibly long and interesting live streams that cover issues within the Black community and for Black women. I do believe he's gay, but he doesn't really talk about it. But that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from Wallace's chart. He does seem like somebody who would be very, very quirky, but also very accepting of other people's quirks. And I say that because his sun trines with his Uranus. So he would have been a very accepting person, I believe, at least on the outside when it comes to other people. And that inventive way that he thought most likely led to him being more progressive for his time, because Sagittarius does deal with progressions. It deals with thought processes. And this was something that was very, very much on his mind at his time. I do think, though, that he most likely did have to make some adjustments, and possibly could have been somebody who would have been maybe withdrawn with his emotions. And I say that because of that Capricorn moon, if I do have the right placements. In addition to that, he would have, I've already talked about this, he would have kept his sexuality a secret, most likely because he does have that Mars in quincunx to his Jupiter. And in addition to that, he could have actually been somebody who maybe would have had a bit of a temper or would have needed to rely on substances at some point. And I say that because he has his Mars in opposition to Saturn in Capricorn. Typically speaking, in a chart, if somebody has Mars in opposition to Saturn, this is going to refer to having a conflict style that's going to be incongruent with how they need to grow throughout time. So this could create somebody who's going to be very quick-tempered. This could create someone who also might go against their best interests. And I say that specifically because Mars is at its detriment when it's in Cancer. And when you have that opposition of Mars and Saturn, they're most likely not going to think very much about like their blow-ups or about the explosions that they may have had on other people. And I think that is something that could have been a possibility for him. He also could have been someone who maybe did want to be single long-term, because he does have his Venus in opposition to his Saturn. So I thought that was a very interesting aspect. And to wrap this up, because I didn't want this one to be too long, because I actually have stuff I need to write and study for, I do want to do a quick discussion in terms of his nodes. So Wallace Thurman was a Libra North node, and his node is at that 28th degree. So the number 28 in astrology is going to refer to a birthright that's going to have access to a lot of wealth. And it would have taken him a while to get to that. And I say that because he does have his North node. It's in retrograde. Now, his North node does sextile his Sun and his Mercury in Leo. So that was going to be very helpful for him. When it comes to the pressure that he would have had on his nodes to change, it would have come in from that Venus as well as from his Mars. So there would have needed to have been a change in terms of his identity and how he thought about himself in order to really go towards that Libra North node. So he most likely comes from many past lives where he was probably the victim of violence of some sort, whether or not this is going to be violence due to his race, maybe in a past life, or he could have also been somebody who was maybe like the victim of a love triangle. And I say that because he does have his Venus conjunct Mars in Cancer. However, in the last reincarnation that he had, he was supposed to focus more on keeping people together, as well as cultivating an image for himself. And that was the image in which he was, going to make his money, as well as going to make his namesake in order to achieve that Libra North node. In addition to that, I do believe that this was probably going to be very difficult for him to achieve, and he would have needed more time on this earth in order to achieve those things. And I say that because he does have his Uranus conjunct to his Lilith in Sagittarius, and Lilith in Sagittarius, it is going to refer to a desire to be wild in some way, to be free from constraints. And this might have posed an issue for him, especially when it came to his North Node status, because Libra is all about keeping things together. Sagittarius is all about the expansion and the quest for wisdom, as well as for knowledge. In addition to that, he has his vertex, and that's the asteroid that refers to expectations that he was going to meet. That is in Gemini, and that looks like it's going to be conjunct to his Pluto. So his expectations for the last lifetime, because he has passed away, was to focus more on communication, stepping up in the expectations in terms of how he was going to communicate with other people. And I think that this was an expectation that he was able to rise to the occasion on, because he does have his Pluto conjunct that vertex. So Pluto refers to support, and it also sextiles his Leo sun. So I think that this was an expectation that came very naturally for him. In addition to that, he also could have been someone who would have been very expressive in terms of their feelings. And I say that because he has his Pallas that is also conjunct his his Venus and his Mars, because those are both in Cancer. And lastly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the other asteroids that I see, and then we're going to wrap this up. The next one is going to be his Juno, and that is the asteroid that refers to our themes throughout our relationships. That is running parallel to his North Node. So he probably was on the quest for fairness and balance in this particular lifetime. In addition to that, he also has his Eros. So Eros is the asteroid that refers to our sexuality. And it looks like that was conjunct to his Pluto. In addition to that, it's also running parallel to his vertex. So I'm wondering deep down inside if that marriage that he had that didn't go too well, that culminated in divorce, I really do wonder. I really do wonder if perhaps he did sleep with somebody in the neighborhood. That's just what I think. That has not been documented anywhere. That is just my that's just me thinking right now. I have no idea if that's true. His asteroid Bacchus, and that is the asteroid that refers to how much we party. That is conjunct to his North Node. So I wonder if perhaps he was able to achieve that status, in fact, through partying throughout the Harlem neighborhoods. If it was through the expansiveness of his knowledge and the Black experience, as well as with partying, that he was able to achieve that status. Because I really do enjoy the fact that his novels are very much about a party. It's about joining a party and having fun at a party. And in addition to that, the novel Infants of the Spring, the title, I believe, comes from a Hamlet. So I think that there was really like a strong level of success with him being able to party all the time. The last asteroid, or I'm going to say the last couple of asteroids that I'm just going to talk about here, we'll go with the negative one for now. So his nemesis That was also conjunct to his North Node. Oh, so this is interesting. So this means that he could have been somebody where he was supposed to party a lot, but unfortunately, that was something that dealt with an undoing for him. And in addition to that, he also has his Icarus, and that is conjoined to his Black Moon Lilith, as well as his Narcissus that's running conjunct to that. So there could have been a desire maybe to do more for the self as opposed to doing more for others. And in this particular lifetime, he was supposed to do more for others, but I think that could have come in through a partying position. I could go on and on about these charts, but I actually wanted to get a little bit faster with them. I also just wanted to pump out more content. I know nobody's looking at this right now, but I really do enjoy these because it's just something that I really enjoy discovering, and I haven't really heard anybody discuss the natal charts of authors. So this now concludes my natal chart reading of the author Wallace Thurman. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the video and the channel, and I will catch you in the next natal chart analysis.